Start the recording. Right, okay, so I think it's lesson 7 this week, and what we're going to be doing this week is something a little bit different. The purpose and aim of what we're going to do today or this evening is we're going to do a low-key photograph, which means very dark lighting with specific highlights on the face, which gives you a really good sense of light and shadow, and it's also quite striking at the same time. So we're going to do something a little bit different with that. Now, it does depend on the materials you're using, how you approach this. The technique that I wanted to use with you was using Parker Quink ink, which is this stuff just here. So if you've got that, then you're in luck, and you can do what I'm going to do. The other thing that I'm also going to be using tomorrow with the live art class are brusho inks, which is something I've used in class a few times. So I realise that most people won't have those at home. So I'm going to show you what I've done, but I'm going to use the Quink inks to do it with, because more people are likely to have that. The other thing you can also do though is you can use watercolours, or you could use inks, but do a light wash first, and then when that's a bit drier, you can draw your portrait on and add the darker tones in to get pretty much a very similar sort of effect. Okay, so we'll have a look anyway at what we're doing this evening. So I'll take you over to the studio wall. Here we are. So we've got some really different things. So as I said, we are doing something quite different tonight. I'm going to be drawing this black and white portrait over there on the right hand side, and this is an example of one example, not quite like the things that I've done so far, but you can see here that you've got some really dark areas, some really light areas on the Bleach Portrait. So the lighter areas are where the ink has been bleached using bleach. I'm actually using something called sterilising fluid, which is a milder version and doesn't quite smell as strong as normal household bleach. Household bleach is great, can be a bit gloopy, but you may want to add a little bit of water if you're able to do that this evening. So what happened with this is that mainly you put some ink down on the surface. So in this photograph here, we've got Quink ink, which is then, when it was, in some cases on this one, I think the ink was possibly a little bit wet still, but you can get some really finer marks when you use the bleach on top of more of a drier ink surface as well. So there might be a mixture of those things going on in that particular example. So I'll show you a few other ones anyway. Let me just see. Right, here we go. So we get rid of that one and we'll put this one on. Here's another example of a bleach portrait. This is by an artist that I found this week called Tula Parker. I didn't actually find it too easy to find very many of bleach portraits. I'm sure there's absolutely loads out there, but I did find that one. And you can see here there's some very sharp edges on here, as well as some mid tones and light tones. Now the thing you can do with the bleach or the sterilising fluid is you can add a little bit of water to it as well, and what that does is it just weakens the bleach so that you don't bleach out so much of the ink when you're using it as well. Okay, so it's a really nice portrait there, and I particularly like some of the mark making up there. Now I look at it a bit closer with you, so let's just make that a bit bigger. You can see more of what's going on here. Look, there's some lovely little squiggles and lines at the top there, and then you've got these smoother areas. So in the center there, it looks like the paper hasn't really been touched much, or even perhaps, which is what I'm going to talk about in a bit, is it might have had some wax, candle wax applied to it beforehand, which then will make the ink, or the ink will particularly because it's watery, will resist those particular areas. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit as well. But a really good example of a bleachy portrait using Quink ink. Now this one, I'll just move that over there, is my favorite one because there's a lot going on here. It's very sort of expressive and everything like that. So we'll zoom in a little bit to this one. You can see down the bottom there these wonderful brush strokes coming off the shoulders, which has got a sense of movement to it. And then on the head dress or the scarf there, look, we've got some lighter brushed marks as well, and this texture appearing in there, which could also be done with a little bit of wax resist or even just a drier brush. Then of course the thing that we notice here is that it's not just the Quink ink we've got here. We look really closely, we can see paint has been applied over the top, and we've got some pen marks in there as well. So we're really mixing things up. In fact, I did do an example pen mark one that I can show you in a few minutes, as well as a rollerball one. So I'm hoping that, you know, because there's lots of flexibility within this, you'll be able to experiment a little bit as well. This portrait is by someone called Jan Paron, P-A-R-O-N, and there's a bleached, I'll put that one down in a second actually. But I really love this one because it's really dark, really emotive. But we were doing a bit of collage last week and over the last few weeks. You can see there is newsprint behind here as well, or words from a novel of some sort perhaps, or just newspaper. But again, we've got bits of paint in there and we've got bits of bleach. It does look like there's a lot of paint in there as well, but some areas look a bit bleachy too. It did actually say it was a bleachy portrait, but it's painting as well, isn't it? There's acrylic and things on there perhaps too. All right, now the last bit I want to show you on this screen is this photograph. So this is another example of a low-key portrait. So we've got the light, really bright tones coming from a light which is shining underneath the model, and then obviously you can see that she's blowing some smoke out of her mouth as well there, which is really kind of moody and atmospheric and everything like that, and quite I don't know, sort of dark, I guess. I can't think of another word for it. So what I did with that one is I bleached it and rollerball penned it. So let me just see if I can get that one up. There it is. So I did my own little version of that. So let me just unlock it. There we go. So on this one, there it is. So on this one, what I've done is I've used brusho in the background. So that could quite easily be Quink ink. And I've used a bit of bleach just around the edges to create some more marks, or some lighter areas with streaks in. And then I used the bleach, the sanitizing fluid, to take out the highlights on the portrait, and then it's started to reveal itself a little bit. I did previously a biro one, but I found that I enjoyed using the rollerball a lot more. And the reason I've got this kind of swirly pattern going around the outside is to kind of to draw you into the middle of the composition, but also to suggest something about the smoke, how it swirls around a person or a face or whatever like that. So that was a nice little experiment that I did there. So you should have perhaps found a photograph of a low-key image, or gone onto the drive where I put a selection of images for you to choose from, including this one. So you could do that one if you wanted to. And then I've got a little bit of a shortcut for you as well to get the thing drawn out onto the paper that you're using, so that you can get started with experimenting with the bleach a bit quicker. But you're very welcome, of course, just to sketch it out. Anyway, we'll have a look over on the desk. So here we are. This is my pen version, and I've purposefully only done a little bit of it. But this was all pretty blue all over, like this piece of paper here. So this is another example. I used, on this particular piece, I used watercolour paper because it's a bit thicker. Sometimes sanitizing fluid or bleach will wear through the paper if it's something like cartridge paper. It will wear through. In fact, you can see there's a few wrinkles on here on the paper. Well, you probably can see it. There's one there, look, on the back. So this paper, it's not too bad actually, but it was starting to wear a little bit, as cartridge paper does anyway when it gets a little bit wet. So I watered down the bleach in places. So over here, look, you can see it's a little bit lighter where I've watered down the bleach. So I've just got a little bit of water on my plate next to my ink so that I can add a bit of water to the bleach as I work. And I've got my sanitizing fluid in this little jar that you normally put jam in. This is the stuff that I've been using here. So it's much more pleasant to use than household bleach because that's quite strong. So the first thing I did was put the ink down on the surface. I'll zoom out a little bit. So I put the ink down on the surface. So obviously this is brusho, but as you'll see in a few minutes, I'm going to do a Quink ink version for tonight. So this could be the Quink ink, and then you can apply bleach to the picture to bring out the highlights and the low-key highlights to really start to bring that figure out. So once I put the ink down, I then got the outline of the face, and then I started to add in those highlights, and then when it's slightly drier, started to scribble in all of the dark shadows with biro. And as you know, I love biro anyway, so that was really good fun for me. All right, so that was that one. Now here's a couple of other ways that you might approach it. So here I've put some it could be a bit lighter actually, this ink, but what you can do is you could put a light colour down first of all, and then a darker colour or a darker version of the colour on the background. And then as you can see here, I've drawn out part of that man that you can see just over there. So rather than taking the highlights out of the face using bleach, we can start to put in straight away all of the shadows. So you get hold of your photograph and you start painting those the darker elements of the photograph in, and then later you could start to apply some highlights as well, using either a white ink or a white pen. Like that. So, and as you know from previous lessons, inks are great to use because you can dilute them to get their subtle tones as well. So if I add a little bit of water here, we can start to add in some lighter tones on here. So just adding water will do that. And I would definitely suggest adding highlights. So it's another way of doing a low-key portrait. I was just really keen to have a go tonight with the bleach as well. So this is over brusho, but as I said, you can use your inks if you want to, or even watered down acrylics. So let's just do a little bit more. There we are. And then because this is brusho, we'll try a little bit of the bleach in there as well and see if it actually works. There we go. So look, I've just applied just a tiny bit of the bleach and it will start to remove quite quickly. I wouldn't normally go straight into it like this. Let it dry a little bit more, but it seems to be okay anyway. So the same effect will occur on the Quink ink as well. The brand is Parker Quink ink. It's a brilliant ink because, as I said, you can work into it really nicely. So I've added a bit of water to the bleach as well, and then hopefully it will remove less of the ink because it's not strong.
Can you go back over the bleached area with the inks?
Yes, but I think you need to let it dry first. Yeah. Yep. Have you got the ink as well? Or
yes. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Okay. That's great. It's funny, I was because I knew that I wanted to do this, but as I try these things out before, I usually try these things out before the lesson, I start to think of more things, so I had them on a little bit late, so I was a bit worried that some of you might not have some of the materials that we need. But you can add little marks in here, look, with the bleach as well, so it's just like drawing. There we go. So you can see it's starting to work there. Okay, so I'll tear that one out actually. No, I won't. I've got another one over here. Okay, so try and find everything. So here is an example of the Quink ink surface here. So when you apply your Quink ink, don't do it really, really dark. So mix some water in with the Quink ink straight away. As you can see here, this isn't black, it's a mid-tone on here. I'll just zoom out a little bit. So a mid-tone is going to allow you to draw your picture onto the surface so you can see what you're doing and not lose any detail. Now, a little cheat for you tonight. If you want to use a cheat, well, I call it a cheat, but it's not really, it's just another way of working. I've got this stuff here, which is carbon paper, which you used to find in things like checkbooks and that. But if you haven't got this, then what you can do is rub on the surface with a pencil on the back, which creates a layer of pencil or carbon, and then basically you just turn it over, draw on the top of your photograph, and that will transfer it. But I've got this stuff here, which is carbon paper, which is really useful for transferring things very quickly. So again, you can draw your person on here, and when you're doing it, try not to sort of feel too precious about all the shapes. Put some marks in to get you sort of loosened up a little bit. Some areas like around the eyes, you're going to need to make sure you get those so you can see them and everything, obviously. But some bits you can put in some looser marks, and then while you're working, just lift it up and check what you've got underneath, and then you'll know how to sort of tackle or what you've missed out. I mean, I need to do this a bit more because I've already traced over this about 4 times this evening, so I'm just putting in some marks around here. Okay, so there we go. So you can lift that off again, and I've got another eye, and then you can start working in again with your bleach. And you'll find with Quink ink, you get a sort of a brownie effect on here. So I'm just going to do this extremely loosey so that I can show you. Use a photo to work from while I'm doing it. And where's my little plate? There it is. So again, because you've got a mid-tone on here, you can go back in with your darker, purer ink if you want to make things start to pop out as well. So essentially you're doing things in reverse. So you're doing a reductive drawing, a little bit like we've done previously, where we used charcoal. We put charcoal all over the surface, and then we used a rubber to remove the highlights. So you're pulling the picture out of the darker background, if you like. So let's just do a little bit more around there. Let's see if we can do a really light tone as well. So I'm just going to do a little bit over there. So that's quite watered down, at least I think it is. So that's got more water in it there in that bleach, so you can see it's not bleaching out as quickly just there. So you can vary the amount of highlights that you put into your image when you do it that way. Okay. Now there was something else I was going to show you. So if you haven't got any of those things, you could do the outline and then start to put in straight away the darker tones. So you've already got the lighter ones in there. So it's a case of working in the dark areas. Now that was the thing I was going to say, is that I have put on here already, very quickly mind, some wax crayon on here, not wax crayon, candle wax. So here's my candle wax, and what I've done is drawn it out and then I've shaded in, and you can do this to varying degrees again, but the difference is with a white candle is that you can't see where you've gone. So what you can do is shine it up against, I've got my light over there, so you shine it against the light, you can start to see a little bit where you've been. And then what we'll do is get a very big brush. You don't need a very big brush, it's just what I've got to hand here. So, and you'll find Quink ink goes quite a long way too, so you only need a little bit out at a time. I'm in fact running out of Quink ink just here, so I'm just gonna see what happens really. So I have already waxed this area, and you can see my man appearing on here, if not very loosely, but it adds those highlights that we're talking about with the bleach quite readily. You've just got to really concentrate when you put them on, the highlights, but that's quite nice actually. And then what I can do is work back into it with the ink. Now if you find that the ink is resisting too much, acrylic paint will do a brilliant job in working even over the top of wax, because it's like a plasticky paint. So you can add in your shadows and things, even if you get the acrylic and add a little bit of water, it will still resist quite well up to a point. So you could then start adding in the tonal areas on that as well. And I quite like the way you get these almost unpredictable marks in there as well. All right, now as you saw earlier, the other thing that I was doing was working back over in pen. So once you've added all of your highlights, then you can start working in with the pen or with the ink or with the acrylic back into the image to start creating this low-key sort of effect on here. All right, now as I said, this one over here on the screen up here is my favorite one because I like the multiple layers of marks and things. So if I get time today, what I plan to do is perhaps bring in a little bit of acrylic colour into there as well. So there's lots to try out here today, and I'm sure you may have a few questions about it. So obviously I'll help you with that. Um, I'm going to be working on something a little bit bigger, purely because that gives me the chance to experiment a little bit more. And I've also got my photo, which fits. This is A3, so this one was A5, and this was also A3 too. All right, so we're gonna have a little bit of a play around with those things tonight. Now, if you didn't manage to print a photo off, of course you can always just sketch it in as well. I did this technique because I know it's really quick, and we want to try out those techniques this evening as well. All right, okay. Now, any questions, please? Okay, so after that, I just ended up discussing how you could get a similar effect using watercolors. So I suggested working very lightly to begin with, and then gradually adding in the darker tones, and then perhaps the pen later. Here I was just talking a little bit as well about the Brusho inks. They are actually a kind of a powdery sort of substance, very strong pigmented, go a long way. You can throw them down as powders and spray them with water as well, and you get some fantastic effects for different backgrounds and so forth. So if you haven't tried out Brushos, have a go. You can buy them in little sets and things like that, so they're fantastic fun, and you get loads and loads of ink from them. So in the next bit, I think we may have just gone past it. I can't remember now. No, maybe I'm going to put some darker ink over this particular drawing that I did using the wax, candle wax. Obviously I did mine quite quickly, so you can spend a bit longer being really careful with the marks. You could also use some colour wax crayons or something as well, to varying degrees, if it helps you see, because it will help you see what you're doing a little bit more. I kind of like the unexpected element to using just a white wax candle or wax crayon over the top. But look, here I'm just darkening down. I'm using a bit of bleach on there as well, so I had a little bit of fun just trying out that, but candles and wax crayons is definitely the way to go. Now here I'm obviously outlining. I've got I'm transferring my drawing almost like doing a mono print, but using carbon paper. So and I'm being quite loose with the marks as well, so I'm adding lots of different loose marks. Some of the shapes I'm drawing out quite carefully, but others and different parts, including in the black areas, I'm just doing these very quick sort of mark making techniques using dots and dashes and all those sorts of things to bring out some of the details, but maybe suggest some of those details at the same time. You can see the drawings coming through. And don't forget, if I think I said this before, the the ink on the background that I've created was watered down Quink ink. That's so that we get sort of a mid-tone, and we can see the lines from the carbon paper that I've been using. Here I was just showing that you could use other materials to create marks using the carbon paper, which is very much like if you're doing mono printing in printmaking. So the other little technique which you may want to try is you can get objects or surfaces with raised surfaces on and paint them with a little bit of the sanitizer fluid or bleach and print with them as well. You can see the printed marks here. This was from a old little tiny bit of a yoga mat that I had handy, because I've used a yoga mat on my printing machine to create a little bit more grip. So yes, as I was saying anyway, you can use different surfaces. You could use like a wallpaper or something like that as well, a textured wallpaper. So you can see here now I'm using a mixture of the pure sanitizing fluid and watered down sanitizing fluid to create a variation in the dark and the light areas on here. So some areas have come out stronger than others, which is what you'd expect, of course. Oh, that was my wife coming back from being out. Yeah, so we're just building up those layers using the sanitizing fluid here and adding little bits of water. So if you overdo it a little bit with the fluid, you can go back later and tone it down by adding some ink over the top when it's dry, which is what I do actually. I do get some. I use a not a biro, a rollable pen in a few minutes to help me start to draw in even more marks over the top of the bleachy marks that I've already used to create more texture. But then after that I go and do almost like a wash of the Quink ink back over the top to darken it down. So you'll see that in just a few minutes. And you see there's quite a lot of lines and things going on in here, getting a nice bit of texture going on using the thinner and thicker marks. A little bit of hair at the top there. One thing I found, of course, I was working mostly from a printout from an inkjet, and some of the details were gone, and also because I'd drawn over it so many times, some of the details were gone as well. But that didn't bother me too much because I can always work back into it. And in fact, if you want some of the whites to be even whiter than this kind of pale browny colour, you could get a little bit of acrylic back in here, which I don't get around to during this session, but of course you can do that. This is me doing the old rollable pen, so we're getting some of the darker deeper sort of areas within the face drawn in. And I'm still using lots of squiggles, dots, dashes, scribbles, lines, cross hatching to achieve some of these ideas on here. It's a lovely experiment, a lovely way to work, because I didn't expect to work in the way I'm doing, but I did choose this picture because of all of the detail and texture within it, and also because it's nice and close up, so you can really get intimate with the expression and so forth as well. So I just decided to focus on one side so that I can use the other just to explain and show tomorrow. So you'll see me in a minute switch to a little bit of ink. There we go. So I decided some areas needed a little bit more tone in there. So actually I think I was adding bleach, to be honest. I'm going to get some ink out in a few minutes, I think. So it's coming along now. So there we go. So we're adding some watered down ink so that I don't go too heavy everywhere. So this pushes the idea of the tone and shadow even further. Gives me a chance to add some overall tones and really start to make areas have some shape and form on here as well. There we go. Back in with the pen straight afterwards as well. And then one thing I couldn't see when working from the inkjet print was the shadow down the side of the nose on the right hand side. So in a few minutes I start to put a little, there you go, I start to put a little bit of that in, and I see it's quite harsh, so I start to try to soften it down with a few more marks as well. That little mark there that just went on the nose, that was a little bit of a mistake, so later on I'll probably take that out and soften it a little bit. So that line that goes down the nose needs a bit of adjusting, but that can be done. bit later. Thank you very much for watching this evening, and I'll see you again next lesson. Bye.